I am Bridget Napier, was Montgomery. But I had been out in India where I went after I left school. So if I start at the beginning, would that be easier?
Yeah. So then, if you just tell me about your links to India then.
Well, my link started, I suppose, well, first of all, my father went out in 1928 and he was not married, of course. You weren't allowed to be married if you were an assistant manager for a tea company, so off he set, leaving behind his fiancée, my mother, whose name was Elizabeth. And in 1934 he came home on leave for the first time. This was quite considered. You were still not allowed to get married not allowed to get married until you were a full-blown manager. But he said that if he didn't get married, he wasn't going back again. So they relaxed the rules and they got married in 1934. And so back again to India. So he probably came home in June, I would think. And they went away back again for the cold weather, which was sort of the end of the year, which was bearable. The hot weather for somebody who would not, like my mother, going out would have been pretty awful, I think. Anyway, so they lived there. And I do remember my mother saying it was the happiest time of her life. Oh. I know. She was a very practical woman, and she loved being able to do things. It was very primitive, really, because they didn't have fridges or anything like that. But she sort of, she made curtains and things like that. And in 1936, she discovered she was going to have a baby. That's me. So, since her name was Elizabeth Muriel Kennedy, and the Kennedy women had always been very unlucky with their pregnancies, which had always been very difficult. So it was decided that she would come home to have me. Okay. So she must have come home. I was born in October, so she probably came home, I would think, in about June, I think, and would have come by boat, and takes 2 weeks. Yeah. So home she came to Northern Ireland and settled in, and I was born then in October. And I remember I was born in Lower Crescent, which is where Old Victoria was. Upper Crescent is Old Victoria. And funnily enough, went to school there. But there was a Mrs. Hunter's nursing home that she went into, so Mum told me. So then in the spring, off I went again, so I would have been about 4 months old, I suppose. And out we went to India.
It's very brave.
Well, I think probably, well, to be perfectly honest, I think my mum was getting on a bit. I mean, to have a child at 36 was no joke, and particularly with the history that they had behind them. Anyway, off she went back again, and she was thrilled to bits to discover that Father had managed to purchase what was called a refrigerator, which was massive, but gave you about 2 drops of ice, however, that was very good. And so my early years were spent there, and they were spent in, I think it was called Amguri bungalow, which was a sort of, I think there's a photograph of it there, a little old-fashioned bungalow. But I remember it vaguely, because I was quite little, but I do remember we had loads of animals, because Mum had decided that it would be a good thing to keep a few cows, so we had some cows, and we had a goat, and a dog, as usual, and Mum kept hens. Mind you, there were servants to help look after all this stuff. So, where was I? I've lost my thread a bit there. Anyway, so for the 1939 came, and it was home leave time again, so this time 3 of us went home in the boat. It still took another fortnight, and I don't really remember anything much of it, except that I didn't speak English, of course, which was not very well, didn't go down too well. Okay. So it was like a 3-way thing, my grandmothers lived here, and loads of aunts and uncles. So they spoke to me, who looked at Mother, and we sort of went round in a circle.
So would you have spoken Hindi then?
I spoke only Hindi, so I would have been 3, I suppose. Because I remember we went to Scotland. Mum had an elder sister who lived in Scotland, and we met there a bloke called Sir John Cargill. He'd been something to do with the Burma Oil Company, and he also spoke Hindi. And so he and I had lots of chats, even though he was about 99 and I was, 3, I suppose. Yeah. And then a wire came, they were called wires, telegram thing, saying, passage booked on whatever it is, MVSS or whatever, so-and-so, return at once, and it was from the Moran Tea Company, so of course solved all problems. Off we went back again. So from then until 1946 summer, I lived out in India, and I have to say it was the happiest time of my life. It was really, I mean, I can remember it almost idyllic. I had a pet monkey, and Mum, of course, we had all these creatures, you know, that Mum was very much a hands-on person, so even though we had hens, we looked after them as well as, and there was only me, there were very few children around. I had a little friend who was my aya's daughter. I think her name was Meenie, actually. Actually, I didn't like her very much, but Mum thought it was very good for me. She was awfully bossy, you know, and was always sort of dictating what we should play. So I don't know what happened, but somehow Meenie faded away after, and perhaps I had said I didn't like her. And then when I was, after that, I had a very nice ayah who was called Martha. And Martha was a Christian. And I remember the day, I suppose my parents had been saying, you know, we need an ayah for our daughter, who would have been probably about 4 or something like that, 4 or 5. And I remember Martha's father and grandfather and brothers coming up to the bungalow and interrogating Heck, because of course he was a male person, first of all to see whether this was a suitable venue for their daughter. And I can remember seeing them sitting at the bottom of the garden consulting, and then they came back again. Now the garden was a massive, it's called the compound, you know.
Yes.
I can remember them coming up, and you know, Mum and I sat, and Heck went forward, and they said yes, they had consulted, and they decided that it was okay, an okay place for Martha to be. Martha would have been about 14, I think.
Right.
And so Martha was my ayah until I left, and I loved her most dearly. It really was wonderful. I was very happy. And then, of course, time marched on, the war ended, although it was very frightening. Mum and I were evacuated to Darjeeling, to a place called Margaret's Hope, a tea garden. Then, I suppose, 6, 7, Mum decided, having been trying to teach me, I suppose, that I should go to school. So I went to school in Darjeeling, which was, well, it was like nothing I'd ever thought it would be. I remember we stayed in a hotel while presumably Mum had been not well, and the climate agreed with her. And I remember very well that Mum coming up and saying to me, well, dear, we're away now, we're going back. And me saying, right, and then oh, no, not you. And I stayed behind, and off they went. And it took about 3 days in the train to get up to Darjeeling, because of course we were down in the plains.
Yeah.
And I was desolate. However, you're young, so you cope with all that. Off I went again, this time with a gap of, 8 years, I suppose. And it was quite strange. Heck had already flown back again, but Mum and I went out in the boat. And those days girls were so, Mum was sort of like you did everything that your mother told you to do. You wouldn't have dreamt of disobeying.
Yes.
And we were so meek, you know. There were laws, ridiculous laws, like now when you go to breakfast the first morning when you're on the boat, it's okay to wear a bit of makeup, no lipstick. True. And in the night, the first evening that you're there, it is not done to dress up. Now you dressed up, you wore an evening dress, but it wasn't done. It showed that you were sort of a bit not knowing these things if you did dress up the first night. And, this was considered to be, it was so ridiculous, but of course you believed all that. So 2 weeks of being on the boat was great fun, and there were loads of blokes going out to be assistant managers. So of course your heart broke about 50 times, this is it. And, again, mother, you were attached to her by an invisible string, so you never went anywhere. You almost had to ask if it was okay if you could take a little turn around the deck. So then when we got to Calcutta, we went back up, we'd be up to Assam by train. Which was, the trains didn't have air conditioning, but, you could open the windows, and you had a coupe, they were called, which was a carriage where you slept as well. And at various stops, you had a sort of basket brought on with your food. It came from Furpos, which was a rather posh type, sort of, I suppose like a pseudo Fortnum and Mason's kind of place. Well, that was quite exciting actually, because I remember looking out of the window, you know, and you passed through. I mean, it was really all jungle. I mean, I remember looking out and seeing elephants, you know, not elephants that you'd see just tearing things down off trees and things. And of course, this was all new to me all over again.
Yeah.
So then we got up to, we flew from Bombay, I think, and we went to Johort, which was the then place that you flew to, and it was in a Dakota, I remember. You know, one of those planes that sort of slopes.
Oh, right.
And they didn't have runways, they had a kind of mesh stuff put down which had been left behind with the Americans.
Right.
So anyway, Heck was there to meet us, which was all very exciting. And went back to the bungalow. Now this was a different bungalow I had not been in. This was a new bungalow because Heck had risen in this and was now the general manager.
Right, okay.
So he was sort of promoted to this position. So it was funny, really, because I can remember the photographs floating around somewhere. The very first day that we arrived, somebody had shot a panther, and I remember going out to have my photograph taken with whoever, the shikari person, and he had a single-barreled gun, like something out of, you know, Jim Corbett days, and loads of sort of bandolier things, and there were lots of hangers-on, and I towered above them all, so mortified. So anyways, from that time, it was great fun. I really enjoyed it. But I do remember that about second or third day, my bedroom was at the end, and there was a desk. You looked out on the compound, and I was sitting. I must have been writing to somebody, and I could hear sort of laughing, and I looked out, and there were about 20 women, all waving and smiling, and I thought, I don't know what they're saying. And of course, these were all women who knew me as a child. So I had to run away and get Mum, whose Hindi was okay but not great. And we had a 2 or 3-way conversation only the other way around. When I went back, it was completely changed. There'd been 1947. It just was, but as I say, it didn't seem to matter. It just seemed to have changed. There was no sort of sneerings or nastiness or anything like that.
That would have been after partition.
Yes. And I remember that we had the first Indian, Harry Singh, his name was, assistant manager. He was very good looking, of course, and because he would have been about in his late 20s. I was smitten badly, but I was smitten by everybody because I was so utterly witless. If you went to a dance, you know, literally, even though you were not the most beauteous creature in the world, you could know that they would literally be fighting to dance with you. There's nobody else there. So it didn't really do your sort of, you know, didn't give you any idea of what the world was like.
Yeah. And
Mum was not much cop because, of course, she still belonged to an old generation, I thought. So anyway, we had 3 very good years, very lovely years. I was very happy again, and had various, you know, thought that I might get married, and had a sort of a fiancé, but I don't really think I had. I thought that I might. I think I was so desperate not to go back to dear old Nornarn. Yeah. However, it was not to be. Father retired, and that it was a whole month of things, you know, dues and Kaya. The Kaya was like your local bank manager. The Kaya was the bloke you applied to. He did all the finance for the tea garden and things like that. And the Kaya had a big party, I remember. And he had a wife and 3 or 4 kids who didn't appear, of course. They were in strict purdah. But I remember they came to tea. Mum had decided that the Kaya, not the Kaya, Mrs. Kaya, Kaya's mother, who was an immensely fat lady, and the Kaya's sister, and all these kids, we would have them for tea. And we had a bloke who made bread. He and Mum consulted as to what would be suitable for this. So he made buns, You know, those ones with little things on the top.
Oh.
So anyway, they came. They were terrible children. I mean, they were hideously spoiled. Their ayah, Mrs. Kaya, I can't remember her name, which was extremely pretty. And she spoke a very little English.
Right.
Mother didn't speak any at all, and neither did the sister. And they were both huge. And the kids were terrible and leapt about, you know, and sort of, Mum was kind of frenzied, and then we had a piano. So Mum played the piano, and everybody was happy after that. Yes, it's quite funny. So that when Kaya gave a party, Mum and I came in to say farewell to his female relatives, and as a special treat, because of Heck being such I suppose they thought he was about 1 million anyway, he was invited in as well to meet them. This was a great honour. And so this all went on to the day we were leaving, and the rains were beginning then, and there'd been tremendous floods. So we set out, and then we had to come back again because we couldn't make it as far as Dibrugarh, which is where the plane took off from. So we set off again the next day, only this time we went in the ambulance. They had bought a posh new ambulance quite high off the ground. So I can remember looking out and seeing nothing but looked like water, you know, sea. So that was that. And I remember thinking, that's it, you know, and it looked so grey. And and there I was, 2 weeks later, back again in Northern Ireland.